This is the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd. If you're looking to generate wealth and passive income in the lucrative world of mobile home parks, you're in the right place. You'll discover solutions to the common legal and operational pitfalls and how to optimize parks to maximize income. Your host is in the trenches. He's a real estate attorney, financial analyst, and mobile home park investor and operator. Now, let's turn it over to Ferd.
Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd here again today with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Today I've got kind of an interesting format for you, and it's going to be partially me just reading, which I generally don't like to do, but I don't want to shortchange some of the contributors here. The impetus for this podcast was a LinkedIn post that I did about water leaks, and I was looking for some help. We had a couple parks that have had sizable water leaks and for a decent amount of time, and we're really getting tired of it. And I tried all the old school easy stuff, and it didn't seem to work, so I decided to go to you guys, my network. So I'm gonna give some shout outs to some ideas for other folks and go from there. So essentially the question that I posed was, what are you doing to increase water recapture? How do you find and fix leaks in your parks? And I mentioned some of the things that we've tried is, put a master meter on there. That's basically the city has a master meter when the water enters the park. The second master meter is one that we would own or we would rent. Excuse me. And that'd help us track the water coming in. So if the city says there's 1,000 gallons coming in, does our meter say there's 1,000? If yes, okay, that's not a problem. Now, if the submeters in the home say there's 900, that tells us somewhere between the master meter and the submeters, there's a loss of 100. And that typically is going to be borne by the park. Whereas the water after the submeters can get billed to the residents. And as far as billing, we're not going to cover that today, but each jurisdiction, some jurisdictions don't allow bill back. Some do, but you got to test the water. Some do, but you got to go through the state or the city. And it's kind of a pain. And your property management software, Rent Manager or other, would be able to help you with that. We use WaterScope from Metron, and we got master meters and got lots of submeters from them. So that's the first step. Or not maybe the first. It actually wasn't my first because it's not inexpensive. The first step is walking around and looking for wet spots, which doesn't always work if the water leaks go down, for example. But if the water leak is at the surface, sometimes there's soft earth, or in the summer there might be, extra bright green spots, things like that. Don't walk around on a rainy day; it's not gonna be that helpful. But on a dry day, the ground shouldn't be wet. Other things we've tried, submeters. We've tried leak detection machines. We even bought one. It didn't go that well. They're pretty expensive, actually. But hiring places like American Leak Detection is very expensive. So we bought a machine and tried to do it ourselves, but it only works with certain types of water lines, which, is not the norm. So that was not always the best. There's options like a thermal drone, and typically you have like an engineering firm that has this drone that flies and it'll tell you below the earth, hey, there's moisture in the ground right there. I'd never heard of this one until recently, but it's pretty old school. Is witching sticks. I think like witchcraft, I guess. I don't know if that's really what it comes from, but it seems like it. It's kind of crazy. You take this stick, and the old school is you use a wooden stick, like came off a tree, and you hold it by the earth, and the stick will move because of water and gravity under the earth, and it'll move a little bit. It'll tell you the direction of the water, and that'll say where there's a leak. The modern witching sticks they're made out of metal, but they're very cheap, and apparently it's an art of how to use it properly. We've not been able to be successful with it, but one of the guys on my team swears he knows how to do it, or at least he used to. It didn't work when he tried this time. And then another option is digging up the ground and installing additional shutoff valves to break the parks into sections. And then you can turn off one section at a time. So let's say you turn off the west half, and if the 100 gallons that we were talking about earlier, if those gallons are no longer leaking, well, then they're no longer coming, then no big deal. All is right in the world. All right, I'm back. For those of you that know me well, you know that I pretty much wing it on all these podcasts, this one being the exception. So I never edit them. So I tell my guests, don't drop an F-bomb or anything because it's going to be recorded. Well, I just broke my rule and I hit pause because my wife called and my kids are sick. So mama calls, you better answer. and it's New Year's Eve when I'm recording this. It's my 10-year reunion, and it's 3:45, so I need to get out of here by 4. So I figured I better take her call because she's probably wondering where I am. So anyway, if I repeat something or miss something, have some mercy on me. Basically, I recall covering the basic blocking and tackling moves to try to find leaks. Well, that doesn't always work. Oh, I was talking about the valves. There we go. So if I put a valve off and the west half of the park is the water's off, and I look at the east half and I'm still losing 100 gallons, that tells me the leak's on the east half. Then, but I don't know where in the east half. So I got to put another valve, let's say on the northeast portion, and if the water is still going, it means the leak is in that northeast portion, and then the inverse. So that's how you kind of use the additional valves. The problem is they can be expensive, and you may need a licensed plumber. You may need a permit. Sometimes that leads to breaks in the lines because you turn all the pressure off, and then you put it all back on. I had it happen one time where I had 2 fire extinguishers. This is a big park. It's about 100 spaces. It's like 12 acres, and the city made the previous owner put in fire extinguishers. So just think about how much water lines there are. Well, in order to look for leaks, in this case, with original submetering, we had to empty the hydrants. Well, you get this big pipe wrench, and you unscrew the hydrant, and the water is turned off. So it's just the water that's in the lines that's in there. We unscrewed it, and it shot out like a 6-foot beam of water for like 45 minutes. And I'm like, holy cow. So then we went and submetered, and then we put the lid back on the fire extinguisher, not fire extinguisher, the fire hydrant. And then we turned the water back on the park. And I don't know how long it took to fill it back up. I didn't really test that part. It took several minutes, right? But what it really did is it cost me like $2,000 in water by the time I drained out the thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons, and then put the cap back on the hydrant, and then turn the water back on. And the first gallon went for the first inch and the next inch, and then until the entire park was full. All that was on my nickel before it got to the first submeter. Not a fun thing. So, but that's what you got to do sometimes with installing valves. So here's some other ideas from some of our contributors here on social media. Jeremy, and I'm paraphrasing and I'm taking excerpts because I want to read you the whole thing. So Jeremy, he said, hey, it's time to pothole. He said, assuming that you've utilized the existing mainline valves while having eyes and a stopwatch on the city meter, you then determine the magnitude of the water flowing in each section. Focus on the section with the highest magnitude of water flow in terms of gallons per minute. Then measure the halfway point between this valve and the next valve and pothole. That is, dig out and place another brass resiliency seated valve at the center point. Then close the new meter to determine if the leak is now before this new valve or after. Repeat the process until you find the leak. So this is similar to what I just described. He used more technical terms, I guess. Another thing he mentioned is double check that you aren't paying the neighbor's water bill. That's a theme that several people have. Jared commented, if you're confident the billing is accurate and nothing is visible with thermal or other tools, you have to begin sectioning off the property with valves. So again, that seems to be, unfortunately, what you need to do, and it's more of a robust method than expense than some others. Kristen says, we recently found where a neighboring property used to run off the park lines as it used to be part of the park. Well, when they split the service a decade ago, instead of capping the water line, they simply cut it and fed the running water into a sewer line, thereby preventing the leak from surfacing. Yeah, that's crazy. I had that happen on a deal in Kansas City one time, and the water line was just running through the sewer. So then, of course, it went down the sewer pipe into the treatment plant at the end of the road. So it didn't pop up. So it was impossible to find the leak. Huge pain. So back to Kristen. It was found by looking into historical property information after seeing an article from the 60s and by a determined new regional manager. I think that was her, Kristen Stud. Or Studette, however you say that. I know her. So good work. I wouldn't have thought of that. Go look at the historical property information and then check the property history on any infrastructure that may have been shared in the past. Okay, Andrew said, we had a water line that was directly over top of an old clay farm field drainage tile, so the water never bubbled up to the surface. It just flowed into the neighbor's farmland and out of the back of his field into the creek. We installed more shutoff valves to better look at the leak and did a ton of digging to find it with the help of American Leak Detection. Yeah, I had the same thing happen in a park in Illinois, where a clay tile, apparently this is meant for drainage way back when, or still today, I guess, for farmers, so that the water didn't just sit there. It's kind of like, I almost say reverse irrigation. It helps the water flow on top of a tile or under the ground, which takes it away, almost like a French drain, I'm thinking, and takes it away from its current location. Well, the problem is it goes underground and it doesn't pop up above the earth, so you can hardly ever find it. We had to do that. We had to dig. In our case, it wasn't American League Detection, it was a competitor that was in that location, and they gave us the wrong location. And we dug and dug and dug and dug and dug by hand because it was between two trailers that you couldn't get machinery back there. It was too tight. And we called the guy and he said, "You guys are doing it wrong." We said, "We dug," and the guys dug holes that were like 10 feet wide by 10 feet wide by 10 feet deep with a shovel. And they did like 3 or 4 of them. So they were pissed, and I was pissed, and we were burning water and labor. So the CEO of the company came out of Indianapolis, and he said, "I'm going to prove to you." And he said, I'm offended that we told him the guys were wrong. His staff was wrong, and they gave us a bad map. And he was offended, said, "I'm going to personally come here and show you guys you're idiots." So he came in. It was like 5 hours away. And he got there and he looked at the map and he said, "My guy put it upside down. I will refund 100% of your money. Dig over there." And we were on the wrong side of the park. And we didn't know because we were using this guy's map. So we got our money back, but we spent thousands of dollars on labor and water, but at least he did the honorable thing. Okay, back here to Emma. She said, "I had to over-pressurize the lines to find an underground leak. It was risky because it could have ended up with multiple line breaks." She said, "I had to turn off the water to the community 5 times during a week, 24 hours, 12 hours, and incrementally until about 2 hours. By the end of the week, the ground showed us exactly where it was in a bubble-like fashion. A coupling had disconnected. It was on a line to a home. We used a thermal heat device, the kind used for HVAC leakages, because I had realized it can detect through 6 to 12 inches of concrete." Okay, that sounds brutal. The things I did right. Again, this is from Emma. I had an irrigation specialist with me who built irrigation systems, so he knew the nature of water. 2, I did everything you listed above first, even the witch sticks. 3, I was better with technology than the irrigation guy, so I held the device. 4, I stayed for a week before and after it. It cut down on the complaints from the community and kept the city out of our hair. 5, I relied on my network. Things she would have done differently. 1, rip the Band-Aid off faster. Do it in 24 to 48 hours. 2, get a better sense of the underground lines by scoping. 3, never would have called the, quote, pros. He was expensive and hated getting under the homes. What a wuss. Yeah, a lot of people don't like getting under homes. It's a pain for sewer issues too. Okay, next up is Shannon. She says, "Make sure the billing is accurate." We had a similar situation in Minnesota a few years back where we were certain that we had a leak and went through every avenue to find it with no success. After months of effort, we discovered the city was billing us at the incorrect rate all along to the tune of over $20K. I don't know if she got a refund. She didn't say. Next up, Trent. He said, well, this is some good stats. Water use nationally via the EPA averages 50 gallons per day per person in the home. That seems unbelievable, but parks average 2.5 people per home. Here comes the math. That's 125 gallons per day, or 3,750 gallons per month. Okay, 55 plus communities will use lower. Yeah, that's generally true. And then we've seen communities that average 200 to 300 gallons per day when unmetered. Metering will account for some of the lost leaving distribution leaks to find. Okay, good stats, Trent. Okay, Sean, do you have fire hydrants in your community? He said, "The reason I ask is because the depth of the hydrant lines can lead to undetected leaks for a long period of time. The coupling at the riser on the hydrants tends to fail over time." Yeah, I would agree, not just with fire hydrants, but with water lines in general, and what they call it, heat rods or redheads. They often fail at the joint. So we got some redheads that are basically heat rods, 4 or 5 feet under the earth, going straight down. And when they leak, it's because it freezes and fails at the joint. Mark suggested sonar leak detection. He said it's common with swimming pools when trying to see where the water loss is coming from between the pool and the water source. So most pool installation repair companies have it. I haven't tried that from a pool company, so good stuff there. Okay, Dustin said, "I had a very odd situation in a park where the city's pressure regulator just upstream or downstream, can't recall exactly, of their master meter became built up with some sort of lime and was causing artificially high readings at their master meter. We chased a phantom leak for 24 hours before they found the issue. Interesting. I've never heard of that one. Eric said, we had a company inspect under all the homes in the park. Found a few leaks that were not obvious without pulling back the skirting. Yeah, I had that happen. The first park that I oversaw the submetering on, it was a really crappy 1976 park, single wide, and we submetered, and the water bill for that home for the first month was $2,900. It's like, there's no way. Well, the guys jumped town. They're legal immigrants, apparently. So when I sent them the water bill and wanted to go in their house, they just jumped town and gave me the house in exchange for not chasing them. Well, I went in the house, in the bathroom, the toilet was overflowing at the top of the tank, and it was rotting the water around rotting the floor around the toilet. The toilet was about to fall to the ground, but it was just letting the water drip under the home. Well, you'd think it'd been in the yard. Well, it wasn't. It was just like sinkholing underneath the trailer, and it was on cinder blocks. And I think it's supposed to be like 3 blocks. Like one end of the home had 3 cinder blocks, like 8 inches apiece. The back end of the home had 2 cinder blocks because one of them had sunk. So it was a full 8 inches into the mud because there was that much water. We submetered it and, saved thousands of dollars a month. I think it was, I want to say it was 59,000 gallons and $2,900. It's been 6 years ago this week. So my memory is a little foggier than it used to be. I'm not on drugs, but just apparently that's what happens when your brain's on drugs or when you're getting older. Okay, next up, Andy asked have the master meter provider test or calibrate the master meter. I have not on the subject property because we just installed it. Okay, next up, Barbara. She said, could there also be the additional possibility of spare people in the park in mass? She gave some, detailed example of inflows and outflows of residents. I had that happen. There was one Hispanic family in a park of mine, and all of a sudden the bill went from $50 to zero to $500. And I was like, there must be a problem. And I went over and asked them, they're like, no, we went to Mexico for 2 weeks. So the bill went to zero. And then we brought in like 15 family members for a month, and the bill went up a ton because we had a ton of people here. I was like, okay, it happened, but that's pretty rare, or at least in my limited experience. Okay, Travis, he said sometimes the municipality will offer a credit for the sewer bill if it's a large leak. What if it's a small eternal leak? Yeah, I've done that before. Back when I did single family, I had like a $600 water bill in my house, and the city of Kansas City gave me a credit. And they just billed me like whatever the previous month was, which was $50. So it was nice of them. I recently had a mobile home park in Des Moines where apparently there was a second water meter that we didn't know about, and they just were never billed us. We called when we bought the park. Hey, we'd like to put the water in our name. They said okay, and they did. We didn't say put it in our name for one of the 2 meters. We only thought there was 1 meter. Well, 4 years later, they sent us a bill for 15 grand. Like, what the heck? And yeah, I already looked. The statute of limitations was 5, and we asked for a credit, and they said no, thank you. So, thanks, Des Moines. Okay, where was I at here? Kristen said sometimes it's a good idea to have the meters recalibrated. Also, check each meter installation, as we have seen those hose bibs before the meters and/or unsecured yard hydrants that are not being measured. Yeah, proper installation is part of it. Steven said we found with 2 parks that the calculations from the city were indeed incorrect in how they calculated. It was some messy math, but we basically recreated everything on our own and discovered that although used the right calculations in their numbers, they built as a multifamily property first instead of a master meter first. Yeah, I've had that happen. I've had city errors, especially bulk billing, and I've had them do it on trash and stuff as well. And then I've had them change their rate up and down. So you really got to look at the rate because sometimes they change it. They passed a new tax, and then that's easy to catch sometimes. But what's harder to catch is when it's seasonal and they don't tell you like, hey, our rate's $1 in the winter and it's $1.10 in the summer, and then you're behind. That's my alarm. I got to get ready to take the wife out to dinner. Okay, next up, John. The use of submeters on homes and just off the main meter can help. However, as most are designed, I have very little faith in their accuracy. Well, I mean, I agree, John, that meters and submeters, main meters can help. I'm not an expert in it, but we use Metron, and to my knowledge, they're extremely accurate. So maybe Shout out there to Bill Baird and Chris and Chris Cummins, some of the other guys over at Metron, to contact them, and they can hook you up with some better meters, perhaps. They don't pay me to say that, by the way. They should mention that they should pay me to say that. Okay, next up, this is Julio or Aaron or both. Listen for leaks at 3 a.m. so there aren't any other residents running water. Yeah, that helps. I mean, at 3 a.m., there should be almost no water. And if you do that, Julio said if you use these zone isolation valves at 3 a.m., you can really drill it down. So this is kind of combining a couple different strategies. Okay, Len says if you fixed any water lines the last year, look in those areas first and foremost. I agree. When line is replaced, they cut it out, replace it with a new line, and it buckles. In lots of cases, once the new line has been installed, the weak areas up and down from that replaced line will begin to falter because of the increased water pressure. One time we found 3 breaks in the same water line run after we replaced about 10 feet of pipe. Yeah, agreed. If you think about it, I think they talk about this in the Bible. Don't put new wine into old wineskins. I think part of it's the pressure will cause the old wineskins to burst. Well, that's kind of how it works. If you got a sewer water line, or really a pressurized water line, you replace the bad spot. It's now the strongest piece of the line. Well, it's going to put extra pressure on the weaker components immediately adjacent to it. So leaks tend to happen near each other. Practice tip: map out where you replace them on your property so that you know kind of an idea of what's been replaced, what hasn't been. I've got one park that's got like 50 feet of Orangeburg sewer line that we found during our diligence, and I got it mapped out because I budgeted to replace it. Turns out I never had to, knock on wood. It's been 4 or 5 years. It never failed, but it was the only 50 feet of the whole park that the previous guy had not had to replace yet. So interesting. Okay, next up, Earl said we had a park built in the 40s. It was connected to a main on the east side of the property. In the 70s, the park was quadrupled in size. The new water service for the expansion came from a new main on the west boundary. In the late 80s, the city built a new water tower, which increased our pressure. There was an original water line that joined the 2 sections of water supply that created a water loop. The west line was connected to the east. The west had more pressure and unfortunately was making the city meter register unused water as it flowed through to old city main on the east. My dad and the city got it all worked out and corrected, but they were getting water bills of $10,000 as opposed to $1,000 in 1990. Needless to say, there was never a leak. It's a good one, Earl. Thanks for sharing. Thanks to all for sharing. That's about all I got time for here today, but I think you guys can see some trends and some ideas. So hopefully that was helpful. Thanks to our contributors. For our listeners, if you want me to do this again, let me know some ideas and I can throw it on social media and get feedback from others. Till next time, thanks and God bless and Happy New Year.
You've been listening to the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. Ready to learn more? Go to www.themobilehomelawyer.com for free resources and materials to help you succeed. If you love the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, give us your review, and subscribe today. Thank you for listening. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri nor the Missouri Bar reviews nor approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.